Hi, and welcome to the Virgin River Cafe Rewatch podcast. Good morning, Gigi.
Good morning, Tracy. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Kind of getting Saturday. It's a Saturday morning, just kind of getting some things done, and now we are ready to delve into the Virgin River world in another fun-filled episode.
Yes, we are.
So today, I have decided to go with of course, an iced coffee because that's my jam. I don't think
Yeah.
I've literally had probably 3 hot coffees in a year. I mean, I like
Well, and
it's
and that's a lot for you.
it is a lot. I just don't, sometimes when you're out to dinner and all they have is hot coffee and you're like, I'm tired, yes, please. And you're like, I didn't really want that, but it'll get me through until I can get some real coffee. I mean, it's terrible, but you do what you got to do.
Hot coffee is real coffee, girl. It just doesn't have the pump and
It
circumstance.
it it doesn't count for
That's
me.
all.
It doesn't count.
I get it. I get it.
It's a placeholder until I
Mm,
until I can get what I really want.
all right,
It's
Miss
better
Tracy.
than avoiding the headache because if I don't have enough, because see, I was not born with the adequate amount of caffeine in my body, and so I have to supplement. Just like vitamin C, vitamin D, it's called vitamin caffeine, and I have to make sure that I am at the appropriate level of caffeine per day, or I get a
Yes.
headache. It's a deficiency that I am willing to participate in. That I will take care
Oh,
of that
all
every
right.
day. So
All right.
today,
We're gonna go with that excuse. All right.
today I decided to get a brown sugar shaken espresso. It's iced,
All
of
right.
course. It's yummy, but I love brown sugar. Brown sugar, anything brown sugar or cinnamon is really yummy. So that's
Okay.
what I went with today. What did you get today?
Well, I just came back from brunch with a friend, so I had an Italian espresso.
Yum.
That was very good, and of course, it was hot, as
Yes,
you
I
well
know.
know.
That's okay. You can't
Yep.
put ice in that and still drink it. It's okay. I know
Yeah,
you won't, but I would.
I know. Well, considering how small it is, it's irrelevant. The ice is not really going to help it in
I
that
know. That's true.
department. But hey,
That's true.
but I know you'll sneak a little, even if you have to put one ice cube in it.
I will. Yeah. I just have to be really, 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 really cold to drink something hot.
Oh, you have to be sick.
Yeah, that too.
That generally is when you have something hot. I know that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But
but
that's
that's okay.
that's
That's all
fine.
right.
It's all right, everybody. Do you, I do me. We're all good. It's all good.
Yeah, it's all right.
All right.
Okay.
So, are you ready to get started?
All right. I'm ready to get in.
All
Okay, I forgot the
right.
name of.
Let's get started.
We're in season 4, episode 7. Otherwise engaged. Mm-mm-mm.
Okay. So, in this episode, Joey arrives, and I remember that when she just shows up with shocking news that has Mel questioning her
Joey never.
sister's judgment.
Joey never announces herself. You realize that?
Oh no, she's a surprise kind of girl. Yeah.
Because let
Yeah.
me tell you, sisters show up unannounced. I'm kicking their ass back on.
Yeah. And Jack brainstorms a new revenue stream. I like how they word that, and that will become clear
Yes,
momentarily. Kind of funny.
exactly.
Oh my. So it's at night, it seems, in the dark of the night. And it's so funny
Mhm.
how with the aerial view, it's like they have the mountains and the river, and then you see little bitty lights, and it's like, this is Virgin River. It's a little teeny tiny town tucked in between the mountains and all of that. So now remember when we left our friends in Virgin River, Jack was soothing his soul with a bottle of alcohol outside and being very sad and introspective about Lonergan and throwing the letter in the fire and drinking himself into a stupor.
Yes, he did.
And Mel woke up in the middle of the night with pain, couldn't find Jack, not that she got up to look, but in her pain, she couldn't really move at the time, and called Doc immediately.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we are. It's still the same night because, the episodes, we only get to miss a minute, long enough for them to make it to the clinic. And we show up at the clinic with Mel on the exam table with an ultrasound because there's a baby in her belly.
Yep.
And Doc is got the ultrasound going, and Mel and Jack are looking at her and looking at the machine, and he's like, heartbeat, strong and steady, just like I like them. Now remember, Doc, nobody knows anything. Mel and Jack are the only two that even have a clue as to what's going on. So this is a big surprise, knowing she can't have kids. And Jack is just like, oh, they're both very nervous. I mean, she looks terrified. He looks like I'm an ass. And Doc is like, I'm going to send you.
He is.
Yep. And Doc's like, I'm going to send your blood samples over and, with the lab and just make sure everything is okay. He goes, but heartbeats don't lie. And he just looks like such the proud dad, grandpa. Like, he just is like a smile on his face. He's such a sweet man. And she's like, that's great. And he's like, it certainly is. And he goes, okay, now that we're settled, congratulations on the baby. Because surprise, they can't even really revel in it yet because she's so freaked out. I mean, it's a scary time. I mean, how many they haven't said how many at this point, how many miscarriages she's had, but clearly it's more than one. And with losing a baby and all of that, I mean, it's just like this technically shouldn't even happen, but it did. It's a miracle. I mean, granted, the IVF helped things and we don't know. I mean, everything is so up in the air. And of course, Doc thinks that it's who knows what's going on. Of course. Why would he think anything else? And I don't know that anyone will ever find out anything else, but we'll see. So he's just very proud. And Jack is like, but we're not telling. And Doc knows how to keep a secret. He goes, nope, I won't say a word. So they're going to keep it to themselves. And he goes, now you just take it easy today, and Cameron and I will cover the clinic. And she's like, no, I'm fine. He goes, oh, I know you're fine. I know you can come to work, but you're not going to. Of course, because he's got to be the dad.
Doc has spoken.
Yep. He goes, I'll give you a couple minutes, and then I'll meet you in my office. And so he's like, see, everything is okay. Now, those are loaded words. The baby might be okay, but dude, you're not okay. You are definitely not okay.
Yeah. As I like to say, your ass is grass.
Oh yeah. He's like, do you need anything? And she's like, no. And she's like, I'll meet you in there because she needs a minute. She's furious with him at this point. I mean, this is probably her most vulnerable point. Yeah. And he's acting like this. It's like, ugh. So they finally get back to the cabin, and he's just full of relief, and everything is fine, and just let's move on with our day. Are you hungry? Let me make you some eggs. And she's like, no, I'm not hungry. And you could tell just her whole body language. He's like, are you still in pain? And she's like, no, I'm just tired. And he's like, well, at least everything is okay now. And she is like, you think everything is okay? And he goes, well, yeah, that's what Doc said. It's like, he's like, yeah, he was talking about the baby. And he looks at her like, uh-oh. And you're talking about, she's like, you were passed out. He goes, no, I was asleep. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. She's like, Jack, I thought I was having a miscarriage.
Boy. He has got some nerve, let me tell you.
Well, and the fact that she thought that not only was she having a miscarriage, that she was going to have to drive herself to the clinic. And he was like, but I was 20 feet away. And she's like, physically being someplace and actually being available are two very, because we don't know what kind of shape he was in.
Exactly.
Goodness, this man. And he's like, I'm sorry. Like, he's been saying that a lot lately. He goes, it was an isolated incident. It doesn't happen every night. She goes, yeah, whenever you get stressed, you drink. And he goes, okay, I admit it. Last night I went overboard. I'm sorry. And she's like, I'm just worried. And the whole thing is she's worried about him. It's not, the drinking is a symptom of a bigger problem. Yeah. And he's like, the only thing that you should be focusing on is you and the baby. But how can she? How can she?
Exactly. You can't say that because, she's hoping for you to be her support system. Right. And if your ass is on the grass, it doesn't help anybody.
This is not how you be a partner. And she's like, Jack, stop telling me that you're fine and just talk to me. And he's just like, you think hearing about the things that stress me out is going to be good for you? She goes, well, it's better than isolating yourself and drinking until you're unconscious.
Amen, sister. Amen.
She's like, I'm trying to tell you that what you did really scared me. And that's the one thing that he never wants to do. She goes, and it made me feel alone. He would never want her to feel that way. I'm really sorry. That's not how I want you to feel ever. It's like, then stop doing crap like that, dude. You know? And he's like, I know. And the horn honking, and they both go to the door. It's like, who is that? There it is. Joey with her surprise visit and some man getting out of the car with her. And he's like, is that your sister? She's like, yeah. What are you doing here? Oh, my goodness, Joey. She's like, I'm engaged. And she's like, oh. And poor guy is just waving like, hi. She's like, okay. Yeah, the last time, remember when Joey showed up and it was for the mingle? It was like out of nowhere.
Exactly. And that's what I said. She pops out of nowhere at the most inconvenient times.
I know.
You know?
I know this girl.
And I get she wants to share the news. Now, the thing is, when Mel has news, she calls her.
Right.
When she has news, she shows up.
I know. I know. It's crazy. Apparently, spontaneity is something that Joey enjoys.
As I said before, if my sisters ever did this, I'm putting them back in a Uber and sending them back to the airport. I'm sorry.
That's funny.
No.
So,
and you know me well enough.
I know you totally do that. You'd be like, no, and you'd slam the door.
You know this.
So true. Oh my gosh. You're like, no, we needed to have a plan, and you didn't. Sorry. Nope.
No, but you may be my sister, but no, you are not going to spring that on me. No, thank you.
So now we're at Brady's place. He's got his motorcycle parked out front, and Bree is there typing away at her computer, and her phone buzzes, and it's a message from Mike. Message says, hey, Brady, give me a call. I need you to come down to the sheriff's office. So interesting. Bree's like, Brady, someone's trying to get a hold of you. And he's like, let him. Like he doesn't care. So then Mike calls, and she picks up his phone, and she's looking at all the missed calls, voice messages, call me ASAP. She's like, what is going on? So he walks back in after he's gotten a shower, and he's like, oh, it's just not as much fun in there without you. Nice. So she's like, so I was thinking more about what happened yesterday. She goes, Calvin called you all the way to Emerald Lumber, but he didn't tell you anything about the drugs. He goes, no, he's just throwing his weight around. Because, that's Calvin. He goes, that just doesn't track. And Brady, because, she's always thinking like a lawyer. And so he doesn't know that she knows that Mike has been trying to reach him. So she's like, well, aren't you going to check your voicemail? And he goes, oh, no. Saw who it was. It's nothing. I mean, it sure sounded like it was something like, call me ASAP, get down to the station right away. Like, that sounds pretty important. But he's brushing it off like it's not a big deal.
Well, you know how he feels about Mike, so.
And I guess she does spill the beans. And she's like, well, Mike wanting you to come down to the sheriff's office is not nothing. And he's looking at her like, I'm sorry. Did you go through my phone? Because she couldn't hold back. She couldn't not say something. And she's like, no, but I saw the lock screen and I thought it might be important. And he's like, well, it's not. And she's like, how do you know? He goes, because it's Mike and he just wants to talk. He can come to me. He goes, well, what if he wants to talk about helping you or something with the case? And he's just frustrated with her because it's like she's got a one-track mind and he is kind of like, Mike is a pain in my ass. I'm not even going to deal with him because I think he tried to get help from him before and it really wasn't very successful. So he's not putting a lot of stock in Mike.
Well, also the fact is Mike is the person who came to his house,
yes.
raided his house, and put him in jail.
Yeah.
So let's just say he does
not his favorite person. Not his favorite
exactly.
person.
He's not. Mike is not one of his favorite people at this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's got to know that,
exactly.
As they say, you got to pay to learn. So I don't know.
Exactly. So now we're back at Jack's bar. Mel and Joey end up at Jack's bar, and Joey is like, is everything okay with the baby? Are you okay? I mean, of course, maybe that's why she dropped everything when she found out she was pregnant. She goes, they were just cramps. It's just not how I felt. And Joey's like, I had those when I had James. They're really scary. And, 'cause she has 3 kids. And Mel's like, I'm just trying to shake it off. And Joey's just being supportive. So then Mel takes a look over at this man that she's brought with her. And she's like, so, tell me about Nate. She goes, okay, all right. You might not remember because you were like 10 years old. Because remember, Joey's like a good 7 years older than her. Because she was 10 and I think Joey was already like almost finishing high school. And she's like, okay. She goes, well, we dated in high school. He was the captain of the football team, class valedictorian. Sounds like a good guy. And the reasons we broke up was we were going to different colleges. She goes, well, did you keep in touch? She's like, no, but we heard through a mutual friend that he got divorced. He heard that I got divorced. He got divorced. And he messaged me on Instagram. And it turns out that he's divorced and he lives in LA. And she goes, well, how did that turn into you getting engaged? She goes, I don't know. It just felt right. The first time we went out was like 0 time had passed. It's like 20 plus years. And she goes, and how long ago was that? And she's like, a month. And she's like, oh my gosh. She goes, I know. And that's not even the big news. The big news is that we're getting married tomorrow in Clear River. And I want you to be my maid of honor. And she was like, you're getting married tomorrow at City Hall. It's like, okay, why would they come? I mean, why would they come all the way to near Virgin River? I mean, maybe the only reason would be to make sure that Mel is a part of it and she really can't leave town because they live such a small town. I mean, Mel has said before she could always go to LA if she ever needed to. So it just seems odd that they would get married in Virgin River. I mean, that does, she lives in the lap of luxury. Getting married in City Hall in a small town just doesn't seem like Joey's style.
You remember, but that may not be Joey's style. But you remember, Joey's had to make a lot of interesting transitions since her divorce.
Yeah, she had to make a lot of adjustments.
Right. So I think right now she's just, he may not be in the same, you never know. He may or may not be in the same financial situation as her ex.
Right.
But she, making allowances, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So the two of them are just sitting there chatting and Nate walks up and he's like, hey, ladies. I mean, it's so awkward. And he's like, Joey, can I steal you away for just a minute? I want to check on the rental. And then so she tells Mel that she's going to text her later so they can meet up. And Mel is like, what in the hell is going on? So she goes into Jack's office, like flabbergasted. She's like, Joey's getting married tomorrow. And his reaction, tell her I said congratulations.
Because that's how a man reacts.
Right? Oh, that's great. And she's like, what? She goes, they've been dating a month. Can you believe it? And he just is like, yeah, that's called a shotgun wedding. He goes, no, a shotgun wedding is when you're pregnant. He goes, oh, so if you and I got married. And she just gives him a dirty look. So can we focus, please? He goes, okay, well, when I proposed, we hadn't known each other that long. He goes, yeah, but we weren't going to get married 2 days later. She's just not thinking straight. I mean, she's convinced that she's making a mistake. And she's like, well, I don't know if you want to get involved. Like, he's trying to warn her. Like, this is not your choice. He goes, you seem upset. She goes, of course I'm upset. It's my sister. I mean, that's the only family they have. Yep. And she's like, I don't want her making a decision that she'll regret. She goes, try to remember what Doc said. Don't get all riled up. The baby, as he points to her stomach. She's like, right, I know. I'm sorry. I'm trying. He goes, well. And she's like looking. He says, what is this with this? She has a big map on his desk. And he goes, well, I'm trying to figure out what to do with the land. And she's like, well, what do you think? He says, well, I don't know if it can be monetized or take the cash and build something new or, and she's like, really? She goes, oh, I like that plan. Like he's making plans. Like he's trying to figure it out. So they give a little kiss. She's like, all right, love you too. And off she goes, leaving him with his map and no idea what the heck he's doing. And Preacher walks in. He's like, oh, Mel's sure in a hurry. He's like, yeah, don't ask. He's a woman with a plan. Copy that. And he goes, I'll be cutting out at lunch if that's okay. He goes, something special going on. He goes, I got a private Aikido lesson with Julia. And he goes, private? He goes, things getting interesting? And he's like, right now, it's just a keto. He goes, don't sell yourself short. I got faith in you. So we're going to head over to Hope's. And she has sitting in front of the TV with 2 remotes in her hand, trying to figure out what she's doing, and takes one of them and tosses it across the room. Very frustrated. And Denny comes out like something's wrong. He's checking on her, and he's like, what? And she goes, oh, the remote slipped out of my hand. Yeah, across the room. But okay. And he picks it up. And he's like, he hands it back to her, and she's like, thank you. And he's like, are you going to watch something? He goes, well, I was going to tape one of my shows. Poor thing. He's like, do you mind if I try? He goes, unless you have a PhD in engineering, I doubt you'll get it to work, because she's just having all kinds of trouble. So he picks up one remote and pushes some buttons, and she's like, show off, and he picks up the other remote, and he goes, this one turns it on, and he goes, I've had this TV for 10 years. Sometime I need a minute to get my bearings. He goes, Vernon's at work, and he suggested we have dinner together. He goes, okay, but only if you let me cook. He goes, are you sure you're related to Vernon? He goes, well, you are letting me stay here, so, it's the least I could do. And he's going to make something called soba noodles. And she's like, have you ever heard of it? He goes, no, but you can come to the bar with me. Preacher might be able to help you out because he's looking for them, and they don't have any, obviously, in Hope's kitchen. So they decide they're going to probably have to go talk to Preacher. So
he's the chef du jour.
And so he's like, well, when are we leaving? And she's like, as soon as I figure out how to tape my show. And Denny's like, well, he's like, what's it called? And she's like, Jeopardy. Comes on at 5 o'clock, channel 11, or is it 13? He pushes all kinds of buttons. And she's like, channel 13, there it is. And he fixes it for her. And he goes, done and done. And she goes, all right, Einstein, let's go.
Sometimes I feel way about my own TV.
I know, right? So now we are back with Joey and Mel. And Mel's like, Nate didn't want to come? And she's like, oh, he wanted to. He's just wiped out. He goes, oh. And she goes, well, he did all the driving last night so I could sleep. And she goes, oh, that was very thoughtful. She's like, yeah. She goes, I'm telling you, he is the opposite of Bill. He always puts my needs first. She's like, well, that's great. She goes, yeah, it is. And then she hits her with it. She's like, Mel, why haven't you congratulated me on my engagement? And Mel's like, well, hold on a second. And her phone's ringing. Talk about Saved by the Bell. She goes, it's a Doc. I'm sorry. Just a second. And so she's like, hey, Doc, if this isn't an emergency, can I call you back? She goes, Mel, there's been an accident out on North Point Deer Stand. She goes, what happened? She goes, I'm not sure. Bert called, but the cell reception's bad up there. And she goes, okay, what do I need to do? He goes, Hope won't answer the phone, and I can't reach Denny, so just let them know that I don't know when I'm going to be home. He goes, okay, did you call emergency services? He goes, I need to make sure it's warranted. We're going to go check things out first. So if it turns out we need an ambulance, then I'll hike out and call one. He goes, well, what about the clinic? And she's like, well, nothing's on the schedule, so just be on call. She's like, of course, no problem. Do my best to stay in touch. So Cameron and Doc are out to go save the day. Apparently they do house calls.
Apparently so.
So Mel and Joey are in this cute little cafe. And she's like, Doc and Cameron are dealing with an emergency, so I have to be on call. And Joey's like, it's okay. She's like, so why are you so negative about me and Nate? And she goes, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be. I'm just trying to be practical. And Joey's like so done with practical. She goes, look, I know it's sudden. She goes, right. That's what I'm saying. You know, I mean, maybe just slow down a little bit. And she's like, well, why are you so adamant? She goes, well, because marriage is a really big deal and I don't want you to regret it. She goes, well, I don't want to go through life being afraid of things aren't going to work out. She goes, I know. I think you're just getting married because you're afraid of being alone. Like, why would you say that to your sister? I mean, granted, she did say something like that back when she was getting her divorce, which really wasn't that long ago. It was only a couple months ago. And she had said she doesn't want to. She wants to be divorced. She wants to get divorced. She doesn't want to be divorced because being alone is scary. And so there is some truth to that. But I think throwing it back in her face was not the move. Right? Like, she could have like said it in a different way, or I don't know.
You know, Mel is just
too direct. And then Joey's like, wow. She goes, come on, you've been in a relationship since you were 15, which is probably true. She goes, and I didn't go looking for someone. He just popped back in my life. It's like she's just like, can't you just be happy for me? Jeez. I mean, that's like all she's trying to say. She goes, I'm not going to pass on a great guy just to prove that I can be alone. It's like, okay, yeah. She's like, I know. I think there's a difference between passing and taking things slow. Like, Mel is fine with her being with Nate. She just thinks that she's rushing into it, where maybe if she took her time and make sure everything is right, there's a chance that she maybe would go in a different direction or something. I don't know, but it's like, it's not her life. It's like, you got to let her live her life. And she's like, what does that even mean, taking things slow? I mean, 6 months, a year, 5 years. And Mel's like, okay, Joey, will you just ask yourself, why are you in such a hurry? She's like, I already know the answer because love doesn't scare me. See, and that's the difference between Mel and Joey, because Mel is terrified because she's been let down by so many people. It's just
part of it is they have very different experiences with relationships.
Yeah.
That's the difference. You remember, Joey has had a consistent relationship with her ex since she was in college.
Yeah.
Okay. The difference is Mel has had a relationship with her husband and then he died.
Yeah. Yep.
You know? And on top of that, she has the guilt of thinking that it was her fault.
Right.
So the way she approaches love this is why it took her so long to just get in, to be, not only
to be open. Yeah. To be open to Jack. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they come from relationships from two different perspectives.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. And so for Mel, it's always a precaution.
Yeah.
With Joe, it's just like,
she leaps. She's ready to leap.
She's ready to leap.
And I mean, it wasn't like her choice to get divorced. I mean, her husband cheated on her. So it's like, she's ready. She's like, I'm moving on. And if I can find somebody who I'm compatible with and who loves me and I love, she's ready.
Yeah. Exactly.
Where Mel, moving on, she's still was mourning, It's a different way to move on. Joey couldn't run fast enough after she found out. She's like, get me out of here. All right, so now we're at Jack's bar, and we've got all of this sewing circle. We got Joellen and Muriel and Liddy, and Tara's there with Connie, and they're all crocheting or knitting, and Hope shows up with Denny, and she sits down, and Lizzie sees Denny's like, hey, sorry I didn't text you back. I was with Hope. And she goes, no worries. What are you doing tonight? And Denny's like, she's like, maybe we could hang out again. He's like, oh, I can't. I offered to cook Doc and Hope dinner. And she goes, oh, okay. He goes, well, wait, do you want to join us? She goes, I'm sure they wouldn't mind. She goes, wow, that would be nice. He goes, okay. Is Preacher around? He goes, yeah, he's in the kitchen. He goes, great. I'll see you tonight. So now it's a party of 4. So Hannah comes out of the kitchen and she says to Lizzie, is that Doc's grandson? And Lizzie's like, yeah. And she's like, he's hot. And she's like, yeah, he's okay. She goes, I don't get him. Because sometimes he's super cool and other times he acts like we're strangers. She goes, the classic commitment phobe. Men all over the world suffer from this debilitating condition. She goes, do you think that that's his problem? He goes, that or he's hiding something. Hannah's so direct. I love her.
Yep.
And then makes Lizzie think. Now she's furrowing her brows. Okay, so now we're at the sewing circle, and Muriel is like, okay, so Mel's sister has been dating this guy for a month. And they're like, and that Joellen says, yep, that's what she told Shirley. And she goes, well, how exciting for her. And Hope's like, you have to go through seasons with someone before you can know them. And she's like, oh, really? Which ones? That's what Liddy asks. And Hope, tax season. And they're all laughing. The holidays, winter. She goes, ladies, let's get back to why we're here, the community garden space. And so Tara's like, whatever you want to do is fine. And Muriel kind of comes up with an idea. She's like, oh, good, because we're going to line the entrance pathway with miniature purple roses. The succulent garden should go in the northeast corner of the lot. There's only hard succulents that can survive our winters. And they're like, how about petunias? Oh, petunias are just bad. Why don't we go with a winter green boxwoods and call it a day? It's like, you obviously can't do this without me. Let's start with the soil. We'll need mulch, wood chips, fertilizer. Like, they're just giving her tasks, and they're all smiling because she's sort of coming back to herself. Like, a couple of weeks ago, she could barely hold a conversation and was a mess. And now it's like she's directing and she's giving her opinion and telling them they're wrong. And that's the hope that they wanted back. And they're all kind of like smiling between each other because they see her. And she's finally coming back to the way she used to be. And so Muriel's like, the four of us will be meeting up with the contractor in an hour to discuss the gazebo. And Joellen's like, well, I'd go, but Nick has my car. And Hope's like, well, I can drive. And she goes, well, I don't know if you're supposed to. She goes, well, I think we should go with stone pavers rather than a brick walkway. And they're all in agreement. That sounds like a great idea. So he goes, does somebody have paper? Because I need to write some things down. Now, Brady and Bree show up at the police station. And Mike is not too happy to see Bree. He goes, Bree, why are you here? Because I don't think he knows that they're together. And he's like, she is the only reason I am here. And he's like, what is the deal? Now, this is where they're going to get some bad news. The DA is charging Jimmy with aggravated mayhem. He beat some rival pot grower with a hose until the guy was in the hospital. He goes, wait a minute, he's out of jail? He goes, all pending charges against Emerald Lumber employees have been dropped. And Brady flips out. He's like, dropped? That's great. Like, how do these people keep getting away with stuff? And Brady's like, I stick my neck out for you and you can't even put a case together? And Mike is like, look, we had a case, Brady, until you just... And he's like, me? Because, he blames everything. Then they start pushing each other. Thank goodness Bree is there. I mean, seriously. Bree is a little tiny firecracker, but... Oof. And she just tries to bring them back. Like, let's focus on why we're here. She's like, aggravated mayhem is a felony. Jimmy's already got 2 strikes, so he's facing life in prison. He goes, so we're offering Jimmy a deal in exchange for a new identity. He testifies against Calvin. Come on, he's never going to do that. Jimmy's a psycho, yeah, but he's as loyal as hell. He goes, yeah, that's what he told the DA, which is why I want you to talk to him. You know which buttons to push. Maybe he'll roll, right? And he goes, well, he looks at Bree like, you think I should really do this? And she's like, it's your call. I mean, it's like he's trying to go the straight and narrow, and he just keeps getting pushed down. The only motivation for doing what he did was money, which was not a good motivation, but then he gets himself in all kinds of trouble, and now he's just trying to dig himself out of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it all started with him not killing Spencer and then giving the information to Mel. So it's like he has a redeeming quality and he's trying to do the right thing. He's just a loose cannon. That's the problem. Poor Brady. You feel bad for him. All right. So Doc and Cameron are out in the wilderness searching, and they're like, it's about 4 miles away. The rest of the way is pretty rough terrain. Now remember, Doc's 72. So he's a trooper out doing this. And they're kind of keeping an eye on the light. And he's like, are we lost? He goes, no, but we better get a move on because if we're going to make nightfall, I mean, they got to get out of there before it gets dark. He goes, oh, gosh, yeah, then that would make a really long night if they got stuck out there. I mean, Cameron has no idea. He's from San Diego.
I was about to say, he has no clue where, because if Doc leaves him, Cameron is lost in the woods.
Yeah, they're going to have to send in a search party for him.
Exactly.
So Mel heads back to the bar, and she finds Jack drinking a beer.
Oh, jeez.
I know. And he's like, oh, hey, Mel. And he puts his beer down. He goes, I was on my way to Hope's and I thought I'd stop by and say hi. And he goes, okay, hang on, give me a minute. And he goes over and he's talking to this couple that are ordering some food. And he goes, oh, you guys staying in town or passing through? And they're like, passing through on our way to Washington. He goes, oh, you looking for a place to crash? We got a B&B. And they're like, actually, we're glamping outside of Portland. And he's like, glamping? He goes, yeah, we booked this Airstream. It's pretty cool. The inside is all Art Deco, and all our friends swear it's the best. And he goes, what's the appeal? And he goes, oh, it's cheaper than a hotel and way more original. Just plan ahead, and they book up fast. And Jack's like, huh. He goes, sounds cool. Enjoy the rest of your trip. So he gives them their check. They head out. And he goes, do you want me to get you something to eat? And she goes, no. Mel's like, I've got to go over to Hope's. So he's like, is there something you want to talk about? And she's like, well, I wanted your advice, actually, because I went to see Joey. She's like, and I told her that I think she's afraid of being alone. And the look on his face is like, ooh. Yeah. And she goes, which she did not love hearing. Of course. He's like, yeah, I bet. He goes, if I tell her what she wants to hear, I'd be lying. He goes, well, as long as you tell her you're coming from a place of love. You know, there's not much more you can do. She's like, yeah, you're right. He goes, oh, if you're heading to Hope's, can you take this? She's like, sure. He goes, okay, see you later. And out she goes. And it was some kind of covered dish. So Nick comes up because he was eating, and he comes up to give Jack his check. And he's like, you all set? He's like, yeah. And then he stops Nick and he goes, wait a minute. I got a question for you. And he's like, so what do you know about Airstreams? He goes, oh, the silver bullet. He goes, say I wanted to set one up on my property. How much would it take to get a permit? And Nick, who seems to know, was like, oh, you don't need one. He goes, I don't. He goes, no, you just need sewage disposal, water supply, and electrical hookup. And he goes, well, I got everything but electrical, but that'd be easy. And he goes, why? You need a man cave? And he goes, no, I need income. And he's like, oh. He goes, maybe if I rented 1 or 2 out, it could help me offset the mortgage. He goes, you could put 4 or 5 out there. He goes, you think that could make some money? He goes, yeah, enough that I'd be willing to kick in some capital. He goes, you being for real? He goes, sure am. He goes, wow, that would be amazing. He goes, we could do like guided tours, like fishing and kayaking. And I know Preacher would be into that. He goes, Nick's like, why don't you draw up a business plan and we'll hash out some details. And they give a nice shake. And he's like, all right, I'll get that to you. And he goes, wow, great. I'll be waiting. So now he may have a potential business partner for a glamping business.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness. So now we are at the Aikido studio. Preacher is being helped up, and he's like 6'5". She's like 5'5".
And she just tossed his ass across the room.
I know. And she helps him up. She's like, your turn, big guy. Let's go. Yeah, he's a good 6'8" inches taller than her. So he grabs her and she goes, down you go. And he goes to lay down and he sort of lays on her. And she's like, perfect. That was perfect. And she's like, well, I do have a great teacher. It's like, oh, the two of them. Like, duh, like they weren't going to do this. She's like, so Are you going to help me up or? And he's like, oh, yeah, right. Of course. And he helps her up. Because in his mind, as he told Jack, like, I'm just there to do Aikido. Like, I'm not looking for some funny business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what they all say.
Yeah, it all starts out as just Aikido. And it's raining outside. He goes, all right. So she goes, can I ask you a question? He's like, sure. He's on our picnic. There was a drawing at the bottom of the basket. You and a little boy and a woman. And he's like, oh, yeah, that was Christopher and his mom, Paige. And she's like, and how do you know them? He goes, oh, it's complicated. That's an understatement. Complicated as in a relationship? And he's like, well, they're no longer in town. So, and she goes, are they coming back? He goes, honestly, I don't know. And he goes, and I'm not really in a position to discuss it. She's like, okay, that's cool. I get it. She just goes on. She goes, well, I think that's all for our session today. She goes, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a rain check on lunch. And he's like, yeah, sure. Okay. She goes, so text me when you want to schedule another session. And she just grabs her stuff and leaves. So it's like, was it a relationship? Do you want a relation? Like, she's trying to feel out the situation with him, and he's just not really giving much.
That's the thing about Preacher. He's not much of a...
He's not a ladies' man at all.
Well, but he's not one to give out information unless it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Which is, because that's why people tend to think he's standoffish. It's not that he's standoffish.
He's private.
It's that... Yeah, exactly. And he minds his own bloody business.
Yes.
If it doesn't have anything to do with him, he is not interested. He doesn't want to know, and he's blocked you out.
Yeah, exactly. He's not going to get in other people's business.
Nope.
For sure. So we're back at Hope's, and somebody's at the door, and it's Mel. She's like, hi, this pie is from Jack. And she goes, oh, since you're not answering your phone, Doc wanted me to let you know that him and Cameron are on their way to North Point. She goes, okay. He goes, there's been an accident, and he doesn't know what time he's going to be home and just doesn't want you to worry. She goes, I appreciate you letting me know, practically shutting the door in her face. He goes, Hope, I'm sorry. Can I come in for a second? And Hope's like, of course. Like, she just, the look on her face is like, damn it. She goes, I just wanted to see how you're doing. And she goes, I'm fine. She goes, okay, so no more headaches or memory loss. Or she goes, it depends on the day. She goes, well, that's good. She goes, at least there's some progress. So she goes, I suppose you could have just called to to ask me all that? She goes, I was just about to take a shower. And she goes, well, I'm sure you must have stuff to do with your sister. And she goes, how did you know that my sister's in town? She goes, oh. She kind of looks at her like, like how else would I know? And she goes, well, it's quite the story. And Mel's like, oh, I'm sure it is. And Mel's like,
Mel, it's always interesting that she asks that question. How did she know? Did she keep forgetting where she's living?
Yeah. Do you remember? Do you forget where you live exactly? Oh my gosh.
I'm like, girlfriend, hey.
This is. They knew before they left the place what was going on. Mel's like, I've been trying to talk her into holding off on the wedding. And she goes, but she's just not listening to me. Hope's intrigued. Now before she couldn't get her out fast enough. Now it's like, maybe we need to sit down and have some coffee and talk about it. She's like, you don't, what? She goes, well, it's not that I don't approve. She goes, Nate seems like a really nice guy. And, I think he makes Joey happy. And she goes, so what's the problem? She's like, well, I'm just worried. She goes, why is she jumping into something that's such a huge commitment? She goes, I feel like she's just being reckless. She goes, is she reckless? She goes, well, I mean, if you're asking if her life is a mess, no, it's not. She goes, so even though she's more likely to jump into something, for the most part, things have worked out okay. She goes, yeah, but I think jumping into something as big as marriage is, I don't know, it's just crazy to me. She goes, I just want to protect her. She goes, I know you, dear, but think about this. Even though you and Joey don't see the world in the same way, she still managed to build a life for herself.
Amen.
She goes, yeah, that's right. And she goes, and you probably don't know this, but I'd known Vernon about 5 minutes when I decided I wanted to marry him. She goes, oh, but did you act on it? Married within a month. And Mel was like, what? She goes, I didn't know that. She goes, well, and that's why you're on her side. She goes, honey, I'm on your side. You've been honest with Joey, and she's still set on getting married, right? And she's like, yeah. So unless you're willing to risk your relationship to this, it's time to be supportive. She goes, okay, you're right. Yeah, that makes sense. She just doesn't want to, She goes, thanks for listening. She's like, you're very welcome. Now go have fun with your sister. She's like, okay, bye-bye. Oh, my gosh. Sees her going away, and then Hope grabs the car keys. She is not supposed to be driving.
That woman, she is trouble with a capital T.
I know. So Doc and Cameron make their way to the clearing where the injured party is, and it's actually Charlie. He hurt his leg, and Bert and him were out together, and they've made it finally, after all the hiking through the... They're like, we got here as quick as we could. Apparently they were scouting some kind of animal, and Bert climbed down, and by the time they put his foot through the thing and he hit the ground, the floor gave way, and Charlie fell. Poor thing. And Cameron's like, wow, that looks like 12 feet. And they look at Charlie's leg, and they're like, oh, I suspect you fractured your tibia. Poor Charlie. He's not a young man either.
Oh, God, no.
So Cameron sends Bert out to look for 2 branches, and it looks like Charlie also hit his head when he fell. Cameron's checking him out because he's got a big knot on his head. And he's like, your ears are ringing and my head's killing me. And so they're concerned.
Basically, he has a concussion.
Yeah, they're concerned about a concussion.
Poor Charlie.
I know. Now we are back at the police station, and Jimmy is sitting in interrogation with his hands cuffed, and Brady walks in. He goes, oh, look what the cat dragged in. A big, fat rat. Now, Mike and Bree are behind the glass, looking, watching, listening. And he's like, where's your lawyer? He goes, fired him. He goes, oh, don't want to let anyone speak for you? He goes, smart. And Brady sits down, kind of smug. And he's like, you still don't get it, do you? And Jimmy's like, get what? And he's like, Calvin, all those times he got you to leave the room so we could talk business? What do you think we were talking about? He goes, that's a load of crap. Calvin wanted to get rid of you, said you were a liability. So you don't understand why he put Emerald Lumber in my name and not yours? He goes, man, I'm not cutting a deal if that's what you're getting at. And Brady's like, you think I care? He goes, I don't care, Jimmy. The only reason I'm here is to look you in the eye and tell you that I am walking free. And you're just a dog in a cage. Jimmy thinks he's getting all big and buff, and he kind of whirls up to him and he's like, woof. And he's like, I wonder if Calvin doesn't need you anymore. How long do you think he waits until he puts you down? Brady gets up and he kind of peers over Jimmy, kind of gives him a dirty look, and he walks out. So it's like he did that to kind of like give Jimmy something to think about. Like, you really think Calvin's going to help you? You better roll on him now and save your own butt, because he's not going to save you. So Jack's behind the bar and he's cleaning glasses, and Ricky walks in and he goes, oh, my enlistment papers came in. And Jack's like, you didn't get what you want? And he goes, actually, I did. And he doesn't look very happy. He goes, then why do you look so bummed? He goes, well, till today, nothing was real. He's like, what if I'm not tough enough to be a Marine? And Jack's like, I think you're tough enough. He goes, Jack, look at me. Do I look like I can fight? He goes, that's what Basic is for. They're going to teach you combat skills and all the things you need to know. He goes, it's how it works. And he goes, well, what if I can't hack it? He goes, you'll come back and we'll figure something else out. He goes, but you're never going to know if you never go. And he goes, yeah. He goes, you deserve the right to give it a shot. And he just needed a little pep talk. And he's like, thanks, Jack. So Preacher's back. And Jack's like, hey, you're back early. How'd it go with Julia? He goes, it was good. He goes, we just had to cut it short. He goes, are you going to hang in here a while? And he's like, mm-hmm. He goes, good, because I want to head up to Baker's Grove and check out an Airstream. He goes, oh. He goes, yep. I might buy a few and set them up, and hopefully it'll cover the mortgage. He goes, all right, take your time. And off Jack goes. Now we're back in the wilderness. Doc is taking care of poor Charlie, and Cameron's checking him out, checking his blood pressure and his heart rate. I mean, everything seems to be okay, but, it's his leg. He goes, your blood pressure's normal and your heart rate's slightly elevated, but that's probably because of the pain. And, give him a little bit of morphine. They're going to stabilize his leg, and they're going to have a splint. And he's like, dude, I'm not going to lie. It's going to hurt. I'm preparing Charlie.
It's always good to know what's about to happen to you.
He goes, all right. So they give him the morphine, and then they're going to stabilize his leg. And he goes, ready, Charlie. Here comes the first one. And he's groaning. And so now we are, and I don't know where these houses come from,
because they're good.
It's an Airbnb, a rental, it's something. And Joey is staying in this beautiful, like, glass house, basically. Like, I don't know how it better be in the wilderness and you have no neighbors, because I don't see any blinds.
Well, that's the whole thing. I think a lot of these places that people build these houses as getaways, but they use the landscape as shields. Because I've seen this here, especially up in, Northern California, especially where they are.
Right.
Like, we have a couple of friends who have, well, let's just say they're acquaintances, and they have massive houses, and the entire house is surrounded by glass. Yeah. And literally, they don't have neighbors for miles away.
Oh, that's good.
So they have things for shields, but literally the house is always open, except for, when they go to bed at night, they bring down the
blinds or whatever.
Yeah. And then in the morning, they have an automatic system that brings it up.
Yeah.
So that they can see the sunrise, because they built the house, because they generally build the house so they can see the sunrise or the sunset or whatever. Right. But this does happen. But yeah, this is a gorgeous.
Well, it's like it looks like the living room is like a focal point, and it's literally 3 glass walls. And because you could see through to the other side. So I'm sure I'm sure that's just off the kitchen, and the rest of the bedrooms are in the back and what have you. But it's beautiful. I hope Nate has a good job. That's all I'm saying. Because he's got to, she's used to living and she has 3 kids that now he's going to have to help raise. So, I mean, that's a lot.
That's a wild bunch.
So Mel shows up at the house, and it's Nate. Answers the door, and she's like, is Joey around? He's like, no, she went out for a run. And she's like, okay, well, then I'll come back later. And he goes, did you try calling her? And she goes, I did. It just went straight to voicemail. She goes, is there something you want me to tell her? And She's like, I just owe her an apology. And he's like, oh. He goes, yeah, I hope you know that this has nothing to do with you at all. It's just she hasn't been divorced all that long. And he's like, uh-huh. She was like, just thought, she wasn't thinking things through. And he goes, and that we're rushing into the whole thing. She goes, yeah, exactly. And he's like, right. He goes, but I realize that it's not my place at all. So, I support Joey no matter what. He's like, right. Okay. He goes, well, tell her that you stopped by. She's like, okay, thank you. And out they go. Oh, Joey's not going to have that conversation. So Nate picks up the phone and he calls Joey. And he's like, hey,
boy.
it's me. Your sister just stopped by. Why didn't you tell me you were fighting about the wedding? So that's not going to go over well.
Oh, no, not going to.
So Mike shows up at Brady's house. And he goes, hey, I just wanted to tell you in person, Jimmy is taking the deal. So it looks like whatever Brady said got through to Jimmy, and he's actually going to listen. Shocking.
Yeah, exactly.
And Brady's like, well, you're welcome. He goes, yeah, he also gave us a lead on Calvin's possible location. It's a boat called Starkist. Have you ever heard him talk about it? Brady's like, no. And he goes, no. And Brady's like, no. He goes, okay. And he goes, so are we done here? And Mike's like, look, he goes, I know that Bree's plan was for you to play possum while Calvin got the pipeline back up and running. But make no mistake, if any drugs pass through Emerald Lumber and you're involved, you're going straight back to county. And he's like, relax, okay? Bree's smarter than that. He goes, but Bree has a hell of a lot more to lose than you do. He goes, so if you really do love her, and Brady looks at him like, gives him such a dead stare. And he goes, if you really, really care about her, then you got to cut her loose. Because he doesn't want Bree to get mixed up with Brady's mess.
No. But he's also coming from a situation where he has feelings for her as well.
Right.
So this is not done just for
ulterior motives for sure.
Exactly. And this is why Brady slams the door in his face.
Yeah, he's like, well, thanks for stopping by. Slam.
Yeah, because Brady also knows that he has feelings for Bree. So
yeah.
Brady knows where all this is coming from.
Basically. Oh yeah, for sure.
So he, Mike is the last person he's going to take advice from about his relationship with Bree.
Exactly.
Oh no, he's barking up the wrong tree there, boyfriend. You got to find another scapegoat because it ain't happening.
And then, which we didn't know, Bree was there. And as Brady shuts the door and walks back in, Bree walks into the room and she's like, hey. She's like, don't you dare cut me loose. And she grabs him and she kisses him. He's like, he's right. Brady's like, he's right. He's like, Bree, it's too dangerous. She's like, Brady, this is my call.
See? And just as a slight clue, the way she feels about this man is very evident in episodes to come much later.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And why it is hard, because I hate to say this man, it's
like a magnet. It's like a magnet.
Exactly. He kind of runs through her blood.
Yeah.
Because he is everything she is not supposed to have.
Yep.
He's everything that she's not used to. He's everything she's been warned about.
Which makes him more appealing than anything else.
Exactly. He is that piece of pie or chocolate you're not supposed to have because it's
bad for you.
But you're like,
but I really want it really bad.
Exactly.
Really
and that's the thing about Brady. As much as Brady is just...
It's like forbidden fruit,
Oh, honey.
You tell me I can't have it, I want it even more. And that's Brady. Oh, Bree. She's so done. Oh, goodness.
It's bad. It's so bad. And look at his face.
I know. She's hugging him and she just...
I know. And he is in agony.
It's like part of him is wanting to protect her. And keep her away from anything that could possibly harm her. And the other part of her cannot stay away from her.
Yep. Goodness. As I said, there are episodes to come that this is going to be
that is so evident. Anyway, So
Anyway.
now we're back at Hope's, and Denny is cooking. He's cooking a traditional dish, and Lizzie's just sort of like supervising, I guess.
Oh
Call
God,
it what you will.
that child don't know one end of a pot to the next.
So she's like, so what is this called? And he's like, it's called chicken yakisoba. It's a Japanese stir fry. And she's like, is it complicated? He goes, no, it's super easy. My dad taught me how to make it when I was like 11. I never made anything until I moved here, really. He goes, no one showed you how to cook? He goes, no, we always ordered out, or my parents went out and I ate cereal in front of the TV. And he's like, that's terrible. She's like, yeah, but I was obsessed with Captain Crunch.
Explains her candy fetish.
Right. Because there wasn't really anybody there. And if the nannies didn't cook her something or whatever, then she was on her own.
Exactly.
And he's like, well, I hope my yakisoba can impress your sophisticated palate. Yes, because, let's compare. She's like, I'm sure I'll love it.
Yeah. That compared to candy.
So she's like, so do you know when Doc and Hope are coming home? And he's like, well, Hope said that Doc's on an emergency and she went to the hardware store. And so we can just throw it all in the walk when she gets here. And he goes, so what do you want to do when you're done cooking? And he's like, actually, my phone's dead. And I want to check in with Hope. Would you mind grabbing my charger for me? It's on the desk in the guest room. She's like, sure. So she goes into the guest room. She's looking for the charger. She opens the drawer and she finds a pill bottle for Klonopin with the name Ryan Cutler, which is not his name.
Exactly.
So Klonopin, it's actually a medication that treats seizures, people that have panic attacks, and people with anxiety. Why would he have that?
But then again, Lizzie doesn't know what that means.
I mean, she could Google Klonopin. She knows it. She knows it's a drug, and she knows that he has it, and she also knows that his name is not Ryan Cutler.
Exactly.
So there's enough information there that he's got something he probably shouldn't have. Because if it was his prescription, it'd be different if his name was on it.
Right.
But it's not, which is very suspicious. So she gets the cord. She goes back in and she heads back into the kitchen. Now, Hope, who is not supposed to be driving, is driving Joellen, and they're sitting at a red light, and they're talking about how people have to have the right to make their own choices, and they're like, yep, that's true, and because they're talking about Joey, basically. And so Joellen's like, what did you say to Mel? And she was and they're talking about it, and she's like, Joey's the only family she has left. It's too important relationship to risk. And they're like, yeah. And she goes, and Hope's like, I'm very intuitive about these things. And she goes, Hope, I think it's a left here, remember? And Hope's like, no, I'm pretty sure that it's not. And she goes, how many times have we been to Bruce's hardware store? And all of a sudden, a bicyclist cuts in front of her and kind of makes her nervous. And then a truck comes down and she hits the brakes. And I guess the person in front of her stopped, but she didn't stop in time. And so she hit the car in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing if she would have driven and everything would have been fine. She could have never had to tell Doc. But she ran into the car in front of her. And the first thing out of her mouth is, please don't tell anybody about this, especially Vernon.
Lord have mercy.
And that's when Joellen says, you weren't really clear to drive, were you? And Hope is like, oh, no. So now we're back in the forest, and they're like, you were right. We never would have made it back to the trailhead before dark. So unfortunately, Doc says, I have a lot of experience in this area. These deer stands are just death traps. And he's like, Cameron's like, so what's your prognosis? He goes, well, the good news is he's not, displaying any vomiting, dizziness, shortness of breath, whatever. His blood pressure stable. So he's probably not bleeding internally or has any severe head injury. He's on a low dose of blood thinners. So, we're going to keep a close watch on him in case there's any drop in blood pressure. And he goes, are you sure? Cameron's like, are you sure we can get a medevac in here? Because the trees are pretty dense. And he's like, no, we're going to have to hike out, get help. You and Bert take turns monitoring Charlie's concussion. And at dawn, me and the rescue EMTs will hike back in and we'll carry him out. So that means they're going to have to stay overnight.
Yep.
He's like, okay. He goes, well, you hang in there and I'll be back as soon as I can. And so Doc's going to head out. Like, I don't know. Was it smart, I guess, to send Doc since he knows where he's going?
Going, yeah, because you can't send Cameron because he's going to get
Oh, my
lost, and then
God.
you have to send out a search party to find his ass as well.
Exactly.
So, so
So,
that defeats the purpose at this point.
exactly. So Cameron's in charge while he's gone. Him and Bert are going to take care of Charlie.
Yeah, he's the medical person in charge because if anything happens, at least medically Cameron can take care of it.
Exactly.
That's as much as we love Bert. Bert has no medical
Exactly.
experience.
So now we're back at the cabin, and Jack is sitting on the front porch waiting for Mel with a drink in his hand. This is not boding well.
No, it is not.
A car approaches, and he's like, hey. And she's like, hey. She's looking very, with a very disappointed look on her face. And he's got a smile on his face, like the cat that ate the canary. And she's like, what's going on? You look happy. And he's like, I think I figured out a second income source. And she's like, okay. He goes, I'm going to take Airstreams. I'm going to put them on my property and turn it into a glamping site. I just got a killer deal on my first one. And if I can keep up the momentum, you and I are going to be able to start building a new house by the end of the year. And she's like, wow, that's really great. He goes, really? Because you don't sound that into it. And she goes, I am. I'm sorry, but he's like, okay. And she kind of like walks past him and he's like, are you upset about something? And Mel doesn't hold back. She looks over at the table, sees his drink, and she's like, kind of throws her hands up. She goes, why are you drinking? And he's like, because I'm stoked about the Airstream. She goes, no, when I came to the bar earlier today, you were drinking a beer. And he's like, oh, okay, so what are we? We're keeping track now? Is that what we're doing? And she looking at him like, no, I'm not keeping track, okay? She goes, last night was absolutely awful, and you swore it wouldn't happen again. But then I come home and you're drinking. He goes, honestly, I didn't think having 1 or 2 drinks was a problem. She's like, I spend every waking moment worried about what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, how I'm working out, just so that I can protect our baby. But I feel like you're being completely careless with yourself. He goes, I'm not being careless. I'm doing what I need to do to support you, okay? And Lonergan, Charmaine, the house, those are my issues, okay? And then there's a car that pulls up. Both of them turn around because that car came in hot. I mean, it was coming in hot. And Joey gets out of the car, and she is on fire. She's like, well, I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. She's like, she's not even away from the car yet. Like, she's walking up to her, and she's already yelling at her.
Yeah, she's in full, bitch, get out of my way.
Right. And Mel's like, what happened? She's like, you talked to Nate. And Mel's like, well, yeah. She goes, thanks to you, he called off the wedding. And Mel's like, oh, no. She goes, oh, Joey. And Joey throws her arms out and just heads back to the car like she is pissed.
Yeah. Jack warned her not to do this.
Yes. And that's how they end it. Another cliffhanger. I mean, what do you expect when you put your nose in people's business? I get it. She's trying to protect her. She could have come about it a different way.
Yeah. First of all, she shouldn't have even talked to him. She should have said, just tell her that I'll call her, and left it at that. She did not need to tell him.
Yeah, it's like she alluded to, and what she said wasn't that big of a deal, but it's how he responded. Yes. I mean, it's not like she called him up and said, let's have a sit down, let's have a conversation, and, and then went and talked to him about it. I mean, it was sort of like, I'm looking for Joey, and he kind of inferred that that's what they were fighting about. I don't think she meant for him to react that way or for him to get that information.
I get that. I just think that Mel has this habit of feeling she needs to explain herself to people.
Yeah.
You don't need to explain yourself to people. You came there to see your sister. You basically say, when she's back, can you tell her to call me?
Yeah, we have things to discuss, and leave it alone.
Yeah. She did not need to go into
all of that.
And the thing is, I get this is who Mel is, because she feels like people are owed an explanation. No,
not everybody needs one. I know.
And that's the thing. She overshares sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, especially when it comes to people she loves. I get
She just
she's
goes
trying.
on full protection mode and
Yeah.
mama bear, and I get that. I mean, I everyone knows that it comes from a place of love, but
Yes.
she
Yeah.
tends to get a little too involved. And I mean, it's her only sister, so I don't fault her for it because I know why she did it. I just think she could have
Yeah.
gone about it a different way and would have had a much better result.
I
Like if
guess
she would
so.
have sat the two of them down and said, "Just talk to me. Just explain to me how this all happened. Like let me understand where, how you got
Sorry.
from before to now."
No.
And maybe she would have like she couldn't do anything about it. They're going to do what they're going to do. But
Yeah.
just maybe because it
Yeah.
was such a shock, I feel like it was such a shock to her.
I think the thing is, and maybe it's because I have a very different relationship with my many sisters,
Uh-huh.
that I just feel like the deal is this: we are all grown adults. You may not like my choices, but they're my choices.
I get
And
that.
the thing about it is, Mel, as we said earlier, as we were talking, Mel comes from relationships in a very different way than Joey does.
Yeah.
The thing is, so she had that. Now, did she talk to Hope first, or did she go? Because she talked to Hope first before then she went over to their place.
Yeah, because
Once,
because Hope sort of said you got to let your sister do her thing, and that's why she came to the
right,
conclusion she just needs to
right,
be supportive.
right. At that point, she should have just said, gone over there and just said, when Joey comes, can you just ask her to contact me?
Yeah.
End story.
Or
No
not
more
have
explanation.
gone over at all and just
Over
left
it
the
all.
message for
Exactly.
Joey.
Exactly. And left it alone. And that's my problem with Mel sometimes, is that I get her love for her sister, but there's got to be a point where your sister is a grown adult. Okay.
Yeah.
And she's not, as Hope had said, she's not one to make harsh decisions.
Right.
So then let it go. Let it go. Excusing the song.
Yes.
You know, you know, and just when you see her, you say, I'm sorry, blah, 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 and just move on from there. And that's why I'm annoyed with Mel at this present moment for that particular thing,
No, I get that. I get that.
because as someone who has many sisters, there's always one or two who feel they know your life better than you know your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And I
And
think
so,
that's the difference. Because you have multiple sisters, if one
yeah,
pisses you off, you've got a couple others that aren't pissed off. It's like she's got one sister, and that's the only family in her whole world.
I guess
It's a
so.
it's a
Yeah,
little different when if that person gets hurt, that's the only person besides Jack now, which is only recent, the only person that she
yeah,
cares about in the world, and she's the only
yeah.
person left in the world.
I guess so.
So it's a
I get,
different
yeah,
protection than if it's,
yeah.
you
I see
know.
what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
I don't think she did the right thing, but I think that her intention was good. She
And
just went about it the
yeah,
wrong way.
wrong way. Yeah, I just think so too.
Yeah.
Anyway, to see where this goes to.
Oh yeah, it could go really more wrong, or we could find our way out of it. But thank you,
Yeah.
Virgin River, for giving us yet another cliffhanger episode because
Mm-hmm.
everybody's upset. Everybody's upset. Mel's upset with Jack, and Joey's upset with Mel, and Doc's going to be upset with Hope, and Hope's upset with herself, and everybody's not happy. And Lizzie's
Mm-hmm.
concerned with what's going on with Denny, and ay, ay, ay. All right. Well, we will be back next time with another episode of Virgin
Mm-hmm.
River and our rewatch.
Yes.
Thanks,
Yes.
everybody, for listening
Au
and
revoir.
spending time with us while we hash out all the finer details of this crazy show.
Mm-hmm.
All right. See you next time. Bye bye.